Welcome to another Red Hat Consulting whiteboard video. I'm Carolyn Thiel, a senior consultant with Red Hat Consulting.
And I'm Jarryd Novotni, a consultant with a cloud management practice.
Today we're going to talk about ways to customize your CloudForms instance to allow you to interact with all types of cloud resources and how that ability can benefit your business. So, Jarryd, one thing I see in the field is clients want their CloudForms instances to manage something like a public cloud database, which CloudForms doesn't support out of the box. How can we do that?
It's a great question. So we can leverage services and buttons in CloudForms to manage these types of resources. So here's an example of a service page. So once you've provisioned your resource, you can go to the service page to see information about it. So you have the default attributes, so like your owner email, the retirement date of your resource, but you can also add custom attributes. And so the custom attributes can be anything that's relevant to the resource you're provisioning. And lastly, we have buttons, which allow us to execute automation code, and so we can make API calls to manage those resources.
Okay, that sounds promising. If we want to go down this route, where do we begin?
So the first place we're going to start is writing those methods to manage the resource. So you're going to need to write your regular methods, your create, your reads, your updates, your deletes. And then these will be API calls. And since they're going to be calling an API, we'll probably need to store some additional information in our custom attributes for reference later.
What kind of additional information do we need?
So something like a database, you'd probably want to have the address, maybe the ID, the port it's listening on. It's going to vary depending on the resource you're provisioning and the provider that you're provisioning it from.
Okay, so once we have our additional information and we've written the methods you mentioned earlier, what's our next step?
So now we can create the catalog item. So the catalog item is how we're going to provision and retire the resource. And so normally we have our default provision state machine and our retirement state machine, but here we're going to need to write our own custom state machines to provision and retire the resource. And so we're going to be leveraging those methods we wrote earlier to provision and to retire these resources.
Okay, so what do we do after we've implemented our custom state machine?
So once we have our methods written, once we have our catalog item calling our custom state machines, then we can move on to adding the buttons to the service page. And this is going to allow us to manage the resource while it's running.
So what's the advantage of having buttons?
So what the buttons allow us to do is run any code we want from the automation domain, and we can make API calls. And so with these API calls, we can modify the resource, we can perform actions on the resources, whatever you need to do while the resource is running.
Okay, and can I apply this to objects other than the public cloud database we've been talking about?
Yeah, ideally, as long as the API allows you to manage the resource, you should be able to do it. You should be able to apply this approach to anything. There's also, CloudForms has generic objects in the more recent versions. So if you're on the latest version of CloudForms, you should definitely check out generic objects.
All right, fantastic. So obviously I see the advantage of having a one-button deployment for a resource, but what's the advantage of having that button in CloudForms versus using something that a public cloud would provide natively?
Yeah, that's a great question. So where CloudForms really shines is as your hybrid cloud management. So wherever your resources are coming from, it doesn't matter. CloudForms gives you a single place to manage and view all of them. And with this approach that I've outlined here, it'll even allow you to provision and manage non-native resources that CloudForms doesn't know about. And so normally, if you were to provision some resources, especially an example here, so if we have some resources from a public cloud and we have some other resources from a private cloud, normally you'd have to go into each of those places and provision them and configure them once they're up. CloudForms lets you automate the whole process. So you just enter your information, you provision it, and then CloudForms will automate the configuration. And then so you'll get your email and let you know when your whole service stack has been deployed.
All right, so it sounds like having all that information and all that provisioning power across your entire cloud infrastructure in one place in CloudForms is going to be the real advantage here.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. So if someone wants to get a conversation started on implementing support for non-native objects in CloudForms, what do they do?
You can reach out to your account executive or go to redhat.com/services and see how our consulting and training services can work for you.